Week 2 is here, and Tanner's going to break down everything you need to know. We've got our free bet of the week, stock up, stock down, DraftKings Player of the Slate, and our Primetime Preview with a prop that you do not want to miss. Let's jump in.
The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I am in my 9th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. Fun week 1.
Yeah, that was an awesome week 1. I mean, you had 4 primetime games that were decided by one possession, and that Sunday night game was incredible. Might be game of the year already, but let's dive into our first segment here. And we've got the free bet of the week, and you are 22, 12, and 1 on podcast sides and totals dating back to 2023. But where do you want to go here?
All right, this week I'm going to take Seahawks +3, and that's good to -120. This is kind of a classic week 2 handicap. This line was Steelers by 3 before the season. Seattle played to market expectations in week 1. Pittsburgh did not and is dealing with an injury, but the line didn't move because the Seahawks lost the game and the Steelers won. So to expand on what I'm saying, Pittsburgh closed as a 3-point favorite in New York, but they were -8% in net success rate and -1.4 in net yards per play. They got way outplayed by the Jets. The only reason the Jets lost is because they fumbled that kick return. And now the Steelers have lost a starter on defense, safety Deshaun Elliott, who's worth 0.4 points by our metrics. And then you look at Seattle, played to about expectations, right? They were a 2-point dog in week 1. They were -1% in net success rate, and that game could have gone either way. They ultimately lost because of late down conversions. The Seahawks went 3 for 10 on late downs, and San Francisco went 9 for 16.
Yeah, and Aaron Rodgers had a 24% explosive pass rate in week 1, which was 3rd in the NFL, while averaging just 4.5 air yards per attempt, which is the 3rd shallowest. So that just doesn't seem sustainable.
It really doesn't, unless, Arthur Smith is going to be absolutely cooking this year, scheming up yak opportunities. I think the Jets just had a hard time handing off crossers, and I doubt his explosive pass rate will sustain this week, especially against Seattle's defense, one of the best coached defenses in the NFL. They were 7th in yards per pass play allowed last year. And then I think Seattle's pass rush is going to get home. Boye Mafe had 5 pressures in week 1, and he's going to line up across from left tackle Broderick Jones, who surrendered a league-high 3 sacks last week. So our model thinks this should be priced at, Steelers -2. So as long as you're getting Seahawks +3, -115, -120, that's good enough for the value free bet of the week.
I also want to note that this is not a spot Mike Tomlin has typically had his team ready to play. They are 14-32 against the spread as non-division favorites off a win against a team with a losing record. But let's shift it over to our next segment here, which is stock up, stock down. And whose stock are you buying right now?
Well, I mean, this is kind of an easy one, but stock up is Cincinnati's offense after they averaged only 2.9 yards per play. That was the 2nd lowest of the Joe Burrow era. And our metrics had the Bengals a little bit, better than that. We had them graded as the 25th best offensive performance in week 1, but even still, that's pretty bad for a Joe Burrow-led offense. I don't think there's any reason to overreact here. We know this is a borderline top 5 offense. That's basically where they were rated to market all last year with nearly the exact same personnel. The only changes they made this offseason was swapping out guards Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa, who surrendered the most and 2nd most pressures in the league. So they are going to improve at guard going forward. I'm buying the Bengals offense to bounce back going forward.
Yeah, hard to get much worse than that game. But whose stock are you going to be selling this week?
I'm selling the Panthers. I think I'm ready to call them the worst team in the NFL. Carolina's defensive front got dominated again, only pressuring Trevor Lawrence on 4 of his 33 week 1 dropbacks. And now offseason addition defensive tackle Tershawn Wharton is likely out.
Yeah, the Panthers allowed 200 rushing yards on 32 carries in week 1.
Yeah, and they're going to get punished this week. Arizona's offense is averaging 5.2 yards per rush the last season with offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. That's 2nd best in the NFL. And they have the 3rd highest rush rate off tackle. And that's great against the Panthers because their only good run defender is on the inside with Derek Brown. Another good matchup for the Cardinals offense is they targeted tight ends on a league high 41% of passes in week one, and the Panthers ranked 28th in EPA per target allowed to tight ends last year. Could be a big game for Trey McBride.
And looking at Bryce Young, he was 12.4 percentage points below expectation in week one, which was 30th in the NFL.
Young is down to a career 4.6 yards per pass play. And now the back half of last season is starting to look more like a blip than signal. And it's, not helping Bryce Young. That left tackle Ike Ekwonu is out. Backup left tackle Josh Nijman surrendered 6 pressures in week one. That was the second most in the NFL. And before we end this segment, I also want to add a stock unknown portion this week because there's a couple of things that the jury is still out on.
Okay, well, where do you want to start with the new segment?
Well, let's stick with this game. The other side of that Panthers game, the Jaguars had the third best overall grade by our metrics in week one, but it kind of remains to be seen whether or not they were able to accomplish that because the Panthers are clearly the league's worst team again, or if the Jaguars actually have something cooking here with Liam Cohen. I think where you have to look to figure out what's going on is in the trenches this week because Jacksonville's offensive line ranked last by our metrics coming into the season. They weren't tested at all by the Panthers in week one because the Panthers have an awful defensive line, but the Bengals showed some promise up front last week.
Yeah, they definitely did. I mean, you look at Trey Hendrickson, tied for the league with 8 pressures, and then rookie Shamar Stewart had a 26% pass rush win rate and 3 pressures in his NFL debut. And then the Bengals also contained the Browns with just 49 rushing yards on 24 carries last week. But are there any more wait and sees you want to do for this one?
Well, the other one is Justin Fields. I mean, he's coming off the best start of his career, 63% success rate. Fields had 10 design rushes for a 70% success rate, and he threw 32% of his passes over the middle, which is something that he struggled with the rest of his career. That points to Tanner Engstrand, new offensive coordinator in New York, getting Fields in comfortable situations, right? Using his strengths and teaching him that he can trust over the middle. But I don't know if Engstrand fully trust Fields yet because New York had runs on a 3rd and 11 and a 3rd and 17 last week.
Well, here's the good news. They might not need to trust him this week because the Bills surrendered 0.28 EPA per rush last game, which was 31st in the NFL, and the Jets led the NFL with a 63% run play percentage in week one. But let's shift over to our next segment here. We've got the weather of the week, and the Dolphins are 12-1 against the spread in September home games against teams from cold weather climates, with the weather usually hot and humid there.
Yeah, and so Miami, we know this, makes the visitors stand on the side with the sun while they stand in the shade. Miami usually wears the white uniforms, makes the visitors go with the dark uniforms. So they usually have, they've had historically a huge advantage in these spots. Now, it looks like it's only going to be 84 degrees on Sunday, which is not as hot as it usually is in September in Miami. So it might not affect the Patriots as much as it usually does.
Yeah, the Dolphins might need all the help they can get, but let's shift over to our next segment here. We've got the injury watch, and let's start with these offensive lines on Sunday night.
Yeah, Christian Darrisaw for the Vikings, late scratch. His backup, Justin School, ranked last in pass blocking efficiency out of 53 qualifiers in week one. So JJ McCarthy will need Darrisaw back as soon as possible. That's one I'm monitoring throughout the week. And then on the other side, Caleb McGarry was out for the Falcons, as well as his backup Storm Norton. Third stringer Elijah Wilkinson came in and surrendered 5 pressures. And then Atlanta center Ryan Newsel, who was the backup last year, and then Drew Dahlman moved on to Chicago in the offseason. So Newsel's now the starter. He ranked 5th worst in pass blocking efficiency on true pass sets in week one. And Minnesota's interior tandem, those new couple of guys, Jonathan Allen and John Hargrave, combined for 13 pressures. So they're really going to put the heat on Newsel this week.
Okay, well, looking at the Giants, Russell Wilson spent most of his Giants debut under siege. Wilson pressured on 16 of his 45 dropbacks at 35%, and 8 of those were in under 2.5 seconds.
And the big reason for that was Andrew Thomas was out. He was not quite ready to make a start. This is another left tackle we're going to need to monitor if he can get back on the field for week 2, because backup left tackle James Hudson gave up 8 pressures last week.
Okay, well, the Dolphins also have offensive line problems, and they will likely be without their starting right guard and right tackle.
Yeah, and we know Miami, James Daniels, guard, that free agent edition is going to be out. That's a half-point loss for them. But now it's looking like Austin Jackson's going to be out too, leaving Larry Borum to line up across from Harold Landry, who led the NFL in pass rushing efficiency week 1, which is really too bad because I was kind of ready to make a case for a Dolphins bounce back this week. It really wasn't as bad as it appeared for Miami. The Dolphins turned the ball over on 43% of their possessions. That's the highest rate for the franchise in the last 20 years, but they had a 41% success rate. That ranked 23rd in the NFL. And they were also 23rd in success rate if you exclude the fourth quarter. So that wasn't skewed by garbage time. So while it wasn't an elite offensive performance, it certainly wasn't as bad as it looked.
All right, well, last one we want to touch on is Brock Bowers, and we don't have all the info for this one yet, but it looks like he's going to play on Monday night, but there could be major changes to this Vegas offense if he can't suit up.
Yeah, I mean, Las Vegas averaged 0.39 EPA per play in 12 personnel last week. They were using Bowers and Michael Mayer on the field at the same time. And Geno looked great. He was pushing the ball downfield with 10.6 air yards per attempt. He had 9 completions of 20-plus yards against the Patriots. But now he's going to have to go against an entirely different scheme. Los Angeles defensive coordinator Jesse Minter called too high at the 7th highest rate last season. It was 60% last season. It was 68% in week 1 against Patrick Mahomes. So he's going to make sure that Geno is not throwing downfield on Monday night.
All right, well, let's shift over to our next segment here, which is the DraftKings Player of the Slate. And you actually had Bowers in here last week, and he led all tight ends with 103 receiving yards despite the injury. But who are you going to put in your lineup this week?
Give me another tight end here. I'm taking Jawan Johnson all the way down the board at 3,600. So he signed a 3-year, $30 million contract this offseason, signaling he was a major part of the Saints' plans this year without Taysom Hill. Then he went out in week 1 and led all tight ends with 11 targets. I had San Francisco safeties ranked 30th coming into the season, and Johnson could be in for a big game if he can find the end zone on Sunday.
I love it. Well, let's shift over to our primetime preview, and we actually have Houston as a 2.5-point favorite on Monday night with a total of 42.5. And Tampa Bay's offense averaged only 4.6 yards per pass play in the first game without all-pro left tackle Tristan Wirfs and wide receiver Chris Godwin.
Yeah, and Baker, I mean, it was a little shaky there. He was 11th in EPA per play in week 1, despite a negative 3.3% completion percentage versus expectations. Now, that's kind of a positive sign for new offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard because he was able to basically scheme up that EPA, not due to Baker's accuracy. He was definitely getting away with some throws there. He didn't have an interception despite having an 11% turnover-worthy throw rate. That was second worst in the league.
Well, it helped that they had rookie wide receiver Emeka Egbuka stepping in wonderfully for Chris Godwin. He had 2 touchdown grabs in his first game.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about that as much as I am about Tristan Wirfs' replacement on Monday night. So what they did was they bumped center Graham Barton out to left tackle, and he'll have to go against edge rushers Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter on Monday night, who ranked 9th and 18th in pass rushing efficiency respectively last season.
Well, looking at Tampa Bay's rush defense, they allowed a league low negative 0.52 EPA per play in week 1, so it'll be all on the shoulders of CJ Stroud to move the ball through the air.
Yeah, and I'm not super optimistic. Basically, what happened was we touched on this last week. The Texans did not improve their offensive line in the offseason, so they were going to have to get away with it with solid scheme. And I thought, okay, Nick Caley comes over for the Rams. They had the 3rd highest play action rate when he was in Los Angeles, and that could kind of help the offensive line. Well, he didn't call play action. He called just an 11% play action rate in week 1. That was 27th in the league. So he left his offensive line out to dry. Houston's offensive line surrendered 8 unblocked pressures last week. So they clearly weren't well coached. And they've got, a rookie out there playing right tackle, and he's going to struggle across from Hassan Reddick, who had a big game in his first game for the Buccaneers. So I'm not super optimistic coming out of Nick Caley's first game calling plays. Our model favors the Texans by 1.6 with a predicted total of 43.3.
All right, before we go, let's do our primetime prop. And you are 25-19 on the podcast dating back to 2023, but where do you want to go with in this game?
Dalton Schultz over 2.5 receptions. So only Nico Collins was on the field for more of the dropbacks than Schultz was in week one because Christian Kirk is sidelined. The Texans tight ends had the 8th highest target share in the NFL, and CJ Stroud will need to continue getting the ball out quickly to his tight ends because of all those problems he's having along the offensive line. And it's a good matchup for Schultz here because the Buccaneers ranked 28th in success rate allowed to tight ends last season.
I love it. Well, that will do it for our week 2 preview. If you're looking for more content, make sure to head over to drbobsports.com where you'll find Bob's write-ups of the college football games and also Tanner's write-ups for the NFL games. And we will see you guys back for week 3.